we're going through chapters 4 through 6, or your phone, if it's on Goodreads or Audible, whatever. But we're going through chapters 4 through 6. And the big chapter, right, I think was the one on passion. But before we get there, a couple of you guys had said last time, also Ray and Troy, if you guys at all can't hear us, then give me a thumbs up or something so that we know to talk louder. Yeah, we'll move closer. But anyway, so after the last event, talking about the book, a couple of you guys were like, hey, so could we have more questions and whatnot? And the answer is yes. So as we're discussing the important items in each chapter, then please ask a question if you've got it. And we're happy to facilitate that and talk about it. You can also ask that question during your group time and get some more discussion out of it there. But either way, this is meant to be an open forum where we're kind of bringing up the main points of the chapter, and then from there, if you guys have anything that you want to ask about it, then by all means, please do so. Sound good? Cool. All right, so let's start off. We're in chapter 4, where leadership is narrative, and it's all about constructing the narrative of your leadership style and what we're going to how you're actually going to lead and that vision that you cast. And so I would say, Pastor Elliott, this is a great jumping off point about we're a church plant. We're now 4 years in. We were talking about planting this church 2 years before actually planting it.
All right.
So if you would, talk about the way that you went into that, because that coincides a lot with this chapter.
In regards to it, the story of that, so we're matching that, or just how the whole conversation itself began?
How it began.
Okay. Yeah, so it's good to put us in context of where we came from. Some of us are from the church down at Aliso Viejo. We like to see the continuity in that, because that's a group of people down there who cares about the same things that we care about, which is reaching, teaching, and training, or what we do upward, inward, and outward. Going into a community and letting the Bible do the transformative work that we believe it can do. So that began when I got on staff down there. They'd planted a church in Huntington Beach at that time, and they said, okay, now we have an area in Tustin. And the reason why Tustin is such a great area for us to be in is Tustin is an area that is, one, growing with the new areas of homes being built in down there in the district. But if you think about Tustin, it is central to 5 cities, really. So you have Orange, Anaheim, Costa Mesa, Santa Ana, Irvine. Tustin, we draw from all those different areas, which is an incredible reach. I don't think people typically are going to skip 2 towns, but they will come right to the middle of it. So it's got great potential there. But what we ultimately wanted to do was put a place, put a church where people can have access to the life-changing truths of the Bible. And so the pastors down there, we prayed about it, we talked about it, we gathered a group of people, and we came up here, and some of you are the direct recipients of it, which is honestly the coolest thing. I was talking with somebody in our church yesterday, just going through a very difficult time, and they were helped out by somebody that I know we didn't know 4 years ago and wasn't a Christian 4 years ago. And by the grace of God, they have intersected at this moment to receive help that was desperately needed. And you just watch the providential hand of God move that. You say, wow, God can do amazing things. So that's where we are today, following the providential hand of God through all of this.
Yeah, and I think as, Albert Mohler talks a lot about the story that you control as a leader, and what that looks like. This is the story of Compass Bible Church, and as such, you guys are the leaders that need to help facilitate that. As awesome as PE is, right, doing the work to facilitate a church of roughly 300, 400 now at this point, right, one man, right? This is where we've got to come together and help facilitate that story and come alongside and promote that narrative, as Albert Mohler talks about. Ultimately, right, I wrote on page 38, it says that, or 39, I'm sorry, down toward about 3/4 of the way down, the story must be believed with conviction, told with conviction, and stewarded with conviction. And one of the things that is our story, mine and Erica's, about coming with Pastor Elliott to plant Compass Bible Church was the conviction that he had to see people saved, and the conviction that he had to lead people to Christ. It was something that we could not stop focusing on, because the desire as a Christian, right? Once you're saved, then you guys know you have the desire to see other people saved. Here was a man that was promoting what he wanted to do in this city, and he needed people that would help facilitate that. And so we prayed earnestly about that, and we were burdened by it so heavily that we were like, man, we've got to make this jump. And as soon as we made that commitment, we haven't looked back. And we try to steward that, which ultimately, it's not just about our church. And we love to promote our church and everything else, but what is our end goal? Which is the ultimate story is to promote the name of Christ above all else. So to that end, right, it's the gospel. But in the meantime, how do we promote the gospel? We use our church as the tool to do it. Right. So,
and I think, like you were saying earlier, important for every guy here, like individually, you walk away asking yourself, how am I helping steward the conviction of the church? Because you do play a part in it. So how do I promote that idea that we believe the gospel is the power of God unto salvation? You should be able to draw a line from I believe that to I steward that to this action. So what is the action here? I am a small group leader in this church because I believe I can help shepherd people to share their faith more. I joined the evangelism team because I want to see the gospel go out. We watch the line go down from I believe, this is how I steward, this is the way I do it. And when you can trace that line, now you become effective and active, not just a sideline participant who looks out and goes, okay, yeah, they're doing something. I'm a part of it and I'm vitally important to it.
Yeah. And I would say to that no matter what role in ministry you have, whether that is small group leader to set up teardown team or whatever, these are all critical roles. One isn't necessarily better than the other. All are the function of the church that need to operate fluidly to make things happen.
Yeah, all are not an eye, Paul says, about the body of Christ. All are not an ear. Everybody does something different, but when you do it together, that's the togetherness is what's powerful.
Excellent. Let's see. Any other thoughts if you got a question on chapter 4, otherwise we'll go ahead and jump to chapter 5 and discuss that a little bit. All right, cool. So leaders understand worldviews. Thomas, Justin, correct pronunciation of the last name, please. Sowell. Thomas Sowell, if you guys have ever read any of his books, Larry Elder talks about him often, but really good author, highly recommend looking into him. But on page 44, he says, this is why leaders become frustrated or ineffective. They move from one program to the next, from one team to another, doing their best to direct, strategize, and motivate, but at the end of the day, little has changed. And I think there's something to say to be said about consistency and staying in it, in the game, when times get tough.
Yeah, and consistency, you never want it to get, consistency shouldn't lead to apathy. That can happen. We just do the same thing consistently over and over again. I think, I don't know if it was in this book, I can't remember if it's in this chapter or just some leadership stuff I was reading earlier. There's a lot of ordinary things you must do in the church, but if you do them extraordinarily well and consistently well, then great things happen. But yeah, there is this consistency that we must have in the actions that we do. So there are habits, right? Habits form who you are. I've been thinking about this, like if early on in the pandemic, I was going to use this in the message, but I'll bring about it now. Early on in the pandemic, like when things shut down, like there was times where you didn't have all those meetings in the morning, and like you could like just, your alarm could go off and you could be like, well, 20 more minutes in bed isn't going to hurt because we've got nowhere to go, everything's shut down. And just those things starting to happen, I noticed in me, like I would just lay in my bed and I'd check my phone for a little bit, and I realized that is a little habit that I'm training myself to do. I don't want that to be a part of me. So now, or back then, I said, okay, I need to, no matter what, when my alarm goes off, you get right out of bed. That's the first thing you do, because that's a habit for the rest of the day. The rest of the day is set the tone by the consistency of that small little thing. And the same thing for you when you go to church. What is my habit Sunday morning? My habit is to go to church, and is it just to sit there, sing my song, and then go home? Or is my habit to say, I'm here for a purpose, and I will talk to one person new, I will encourage somebody I know, and I'll set up a coffee meeting this week. Those are the habits that push us forward. We never want habits to become legalistic, but we want the habits to transform our character. So I think that happens when we have that sort of consistency in what we do.
I think that when we talk about habits, the biggest, most important ones that we can look at are our spiritual disciplines. And so we look at our prayer life and our time spent with God in the Word, studying, etc. And there's no greater habit than to get into those, to make sure that we are on top of spiritual disciplines, because ultimately, to Pastor Elliott's point, that's what affects everything else. When Albert Mohler's talking about worldview, right, we can look to everything going on around us. Keep in mind this book was written a couple of years ago, and how much has changed since then. Worldview is huge right now. We just had a presidential election where a lot of things are going to change. We're looking at the call of the church that is being really subverted in today's culture, no matter what religion it is. But on page 45, reveal your worldview to me, and I will be able to predict where you stand on any number of issues, right? When we preach the gospel to someone or share the gospel with someone, your worldview is instantaneously associated with your preaching of that message. Am I right? They can assume certain things about you. And so I think that not just consistency, with consistent biblical discipline gives you the strength and courage to stand up, because keep in mind, we haven't been a relatively hardcore persecuted nation, right? But it is getting progressively worse. You can see it starting to manifest itself. And so I think there's something to be said about this when we look at the worldview that we have as Christians and how it interacts with the worldview of the world.
Which is honestly what we're talking about tomorrow. In John 15, there's this change where we've talked about loving one another and the great environment and fruitfulness that will come, and everyone wants to talk about that in the Bible. And then 15:18 says, if the world hates you, don't be surprised by that. And so we have to talk about those realities, because the world works from a worldview and we work from a different one, and those are constantly going to clash. So the idea that Mohler said on page 44 was, worldviews work by organizing ideas. At the most basic level of our thinking, every single one of us operates out of one unified understanding of the world. For us as Christians, that has to be biblical, that has to be gospel-centered, that has to be everything focused on doing everything for the glory of God, and the world is going to do the opposite. You can basically break it down to two types of worldviews. There is a God-centered one and a man-centered one. And man-centered can have all these different shapes and all these different hues to it, but ultimately they're going to clash, because if man is the center, God can't get the glory. But if God is the center, then that's where we want to be aiming at. So we got to make sure that we have that constantly in our thoughts and our minds as we are leading. Here's a great thing for you to think just evangelistically, is to talk about worldviews. Like, that's one of the best ways to get into gospel conversations. How do you view what's going on? How did you get to that point? Why do you think that that's okay? And it's the ultimate fundamental questions of life. And I can't remember who said it, but I'm always encouraged by it. Every worldview can be thought, but not every worldview can be lived. The Christian worldview can be lived. You can live it out, and it's consistent, and it shows why the Bible is true and why we should believe it. But the worldviews of the world, if you take them to their logical conclusions, you're not going to live that out. You don't live it out consistently. There's no way to do it. And they're going to constantly clash with one another. So understanding the biblical worldview, like we do, is going to organize everything we do here, but it's also going to equip us to go out and to make a difference in the world.
Yeah. Any thoughts on chapter 5 or any questions? All right, let's jump to chapter 6, right? The passion to lead. Super important chapter in this book. I don't know if you've read this book multiple times like me, but really, really good chapter. We're talking about the passion to lead. On the very first page of this chapter 51, the one element that drives them to the front is passion. Without it, nothing important happens, right? And so to that end, just thought-provoking question is do you have the passion, right? First and foremost, for the gospel, right? If you're claiming to be a Christian, do you have the passion? And then secondarily, I always think about this is, do people see that passion in me? Am I able to reflect that passion that I have?
And where will that start for you? Who will be the first people that will see that? Who do you think?
Well, the people that I spend time with the most, which would be my family.
Right. That's the first one we should talk about.
That's
right?
the first one.
That's the first one. If you are passionate about this and you're here as a husband, then your wife should know about it.
Yep.
Like, we should be able to ask her, what's he most passionate about? That's going to be your greatest barometer. That's going to be your greatest litmus test, is the people who are immediately with you. Same thing with my boys. I don't know how deep of a conversation you can have with them, because it will surely get to Super Smash Bros. Right away. Like, after you start talking to them, it's going to get there somehow. But if you ask them at the beginning, what does Daddy like to do, or what does Daddy consistently do? I hope that they would be able to say certain things about teaching the Bible and loving his family and doing these things, because they can at least see it. And to go back to the talk on worldview, you as a leader are the steward of the worldview of your family. What you do with your kids is this: you give them a world picture. I think Moeller described it one time. All you do is give them a picture. You can't give them their worldview. They're going to develop that on their own as they continue to grow. You give them a picture based off of your own worldview, and you pray that God allows them to see this is the right worldview and I want to live by it. But they got to have that picture, and it's got to be crystal clear as you set it for them. So yeah, that family is the first foremost.
Yeah, when we're talking about the passion of things, right? Or I always like to look at my daughters, and when they're doing a project for school, normally towards the beginning of the year, it's always a tell me about yourself type project. And I always look to see how they describe me and Erica. I want to know, what do they actually think? Is it? And my hope and prayer would be that that it's more than just he loves mountain bikes and USC football. You know what I mean? My hope would be that at the top of that very list is that he loves the Lord with all of his heart, and he loves the ministry of the church, and that would be at the forefront of those things. And it's a great surveyor for me to be able to look at what my kids think about me, because that tells me, am I painting the worldview for them so that they can get that picture? But it also denotes that they're able to see the passion I have about the church and the gospel.
One practical outworking of that, if we can just brag on the setup team for a moment. I saw a bunch of guys last week give up their Saturday morning to come tear down after the women's event, which we praise God for. And I saw them back at the office as I was studying, and I saw one of them bring their family. What you can do in that moment as you are carrying out something consistent, you're doing something to serve the church, is you can talk about it in such a way that the kids understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and hopefully gain that passion. So it would be good if you were driving to the place to tear down. You talk about what a privilege it is to do this. I'm so glad I get to help out the church, because that's a really important thing, and your kids need to hear you say that. You need to genuinely believe that in your heart. Because if there's ever that confliction, there's hypocrisy, and kids can see it. But if you're genuinely talking about it, and you're not grumbling, and you're not having a bad attitude, and you can talk about it in a good way, you're now painting that picture for them so they can see, wow, Dad really loves to serve, and he wants to give up his Saturday to do that. That must mean this is important to him. It's just those minor little steps, little tweaks you can do in your own life to be able to communicate with passion the worldview that you have.
Yeah. Let's see. A couple of things on page 52. Passion is not a temporary state of mind. It is the constant source of energy for the leader, the greatest cause of attraction for followers, right? And so when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about leadership in its consistency, right? He mentions the word constant, but also when I am leading in whatever it is that situation, whether at home, at church, or at work, possibly, in work, I want to know, am I passionate about the things that I sell or the company that I represent? Are you passionate about that? Do the people you work with recognize that? Right? Customers, do they recognize the product that I deliver is a good product? Am I passionate about what I actually do? Or because if you're not, how can you be a good employee to begin with? If we're not passionate about the gospel, if it doesn't outflow through us, then people aren't going to get it. They just won't. And so we have to be, it has to flow through us, and it has to be representative constantly. You can't just show up somewhere and talk to someone. Well, that's not true. You can, but it's going to be more effective to be able to live it out and have them see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And on page 53, if I could jump in right here to take that and to say, how can I either spur that on in me or spread it to others? page 53 says, in any context of leadership, passion arises out of beliefs. For the Christian leader, those convictions must be drawn from the Bible and must take the shape of the gospel. And I like that last phrase, must take the shape of the gospel. So, you want to get passionate about something. You could even just practically speaking, you don't have to do this. Just draw a cross on a piece of paper and write out what you're passionate about and see if those two things can go together, right? Like if I'm passionate about mountain biking and I put that in there, is that what I can ultimately be passionate about? Or do I want to say I'm passionate about the gospel and I see these two things, one serving the other? This mountain biking I can do with my friends and I can share the gospel with them. Okay, now I've made a connection. It's shaped by the gospel itself. What can I do to make sure that every conviction that I have is shaped by the gospel? And the gospel is one, which we'll talk about in a moment, where Jesus said to respond to it, you must deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow him. And so that idea of taking up your cross, you put the cross down on the paper and you write down, this is my passion. Does it match the passion of somebody who has been saved by Jesus Christ?
Yeah. And on page 54, he says, our ultimate conviction is that everything we do is dignified and magnified by the fact that we were created for the glory of God, right? So that summarizes a whole lot of what you just said. I think to end on this note and appropriate for the time, page 55, like an infectious disease, passion spreads exponentially through
Awkward.
the movement.
Too soon.
I mean, holy moly, dude. Come on,
Like
be better,
disease.
Uncle Al. And so this, we look at what's going on today, right, in the middle of a pandemic, and we get all these right numbers that are constantly thrown at us and everything. But we look at the science of an actual disease, right, and how it spreads and everything else. And so, not to make light of the disease that's going around in COVID-19, but to look at the infectiousness of it, right, and to mirror that as Christian men and how we need to be infectious. We need to spread, and the only way to do that is to get in front of people and to share the gospel with them. Any other thoughts, questions, or anything? Oh, go ahead.
So the part that struck me was the part he's talking about Kierkegaard and the Danish church in like the 19th century, and how there was a disconnect between what they were preaching and like their actual passion over it. Mm-hmm. And he talks about how he used the phrase like bursts of enthusiasm versus like a sustained passion. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes feel like I have that disconnect where I'm, I have seasons of passion, and then sometimes I feel like it's just bursts of enthusiasm, sort of up against just going through the motions sort of thing. So how do you think, get more to the sustained passion?
I think that's a great question. Number one, if I'm reading this right, it's based on like you said, the teaching. I'm reading this right now, looking at the Danish church in
It's
the day.
page 52 in the book, if you guys are
Kierkegaard
looking
decided
for it.
that their pastors must not believe what they were teaching. After all, they were preaching the most revolutionary and transformative message human ears have ever heard, the gospel, but the church looked lifeless, and its pastors seemed to be going through the motions. The churches had fine stained glass and beautiful music, but Kierkegaard declared that they lacked one thing necessary, passion. And so, yeah, I think that's good, because I think we're at a time where we understand those flashes of enthusiasm. It's coming up January 1st. Everyone's going to have a flash of enthusiasm for what I'm going to do with my diet in 2021, what I'm going to do with this, and that quickly, dissipates into nothing. I would say probably three things would help guard that. Number one, which we'll talk about in a moment, is your prayer life. Do you ask God for that passion? And I think God is one who's going to answer the call. If you ask anything in my name, I'm going to give it to you. Give me passion for your gospel today. Number two, you don't waste trials. Trials ultimately burn out what is unimportant, and like we talked about in the pruning, leave what is specifically important. And I hope that as you're in a community, which is number three, so we want to make sure that we are in a community of people. You just talk to somebody who's gone through a trial, and they realize the benefit of what they went through, and now they want to help sustain people through it. So I would think that those ways specifically could help us to do it. So I think, prayer for that passion, being in a community of people, and asking God to see fruitfulness from it. I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, I think we look sometimes at our life, and we're always going, and thinking back to last year before Timothy was born, I came to Pastor Elliott because I was involved in 7 different ministries in the church, and I felt like I wasn't doing one of them really well, and I think that it's more important to do a singular thing, 1 or 2 things really, really well, rather than 10 things mediocre. And so I really struggled with this question. Was I losing my passion for ministry, right? And it wasn't that. It was just that I was spread too thin. I was in a stressful situation with my job. I'm about to have another child be born. I had a lot going on. And but I really wrestled with this, and talking through PE, it was really helpful to get to a point where it's like, okay, am I acting like this Danish church? No, I wasn't. It's just that I wanted to do things well, right? I feel that God has this expectation that we are trying to live up to, and our ministry should reflect that, and I wasn't doing it. And so I think it's important to really think and ponder about those things, rather than the antithesis of that, which is just to throw your hands up and walk away from all ministry and say, I'm burnt out. We hear that phrase all the time. I'm burnt out, right? And effectively what Albert Mohler is arguing is that the gospel should be so important to us that we should never get burnt out on it. And I would agree with that. And that's ultimately what I was struggling with. And so I just had to relook at my life and hone in on an area where I could be more effective. And so I think it's really important to get counsel and talk to the guys that know you the best, and to think through that, because you don't want to abandon. I wasn't willing to abandon ministry, the church, or the gospel. I just needed to restructure my life so that I could be more effective. Right. So
I think, and if you think about it in terms of your relationship with your wife, you can go through the motions with her, can't you? I mean, you could take her on a date, you could tell her I love you, send her flowers, do all that stuff. But if you do it with intentionality behind it, so a deliberateness, so stop going through the motions, and maybe that's when the enthusiasm comes back, like, oh yeah, why do I get to stand up every week and to sing? Like, what a privilege that is. And what this does is encourages the congregation, and it focuses the attention on God. Wow, there's so much behind it. Same thing with parenting. I'm just going through the motions of my kids. Wow, it's a privilege to take care of these kids. So yeah, don't go through the motions. Take a step back and go deliberately, why am I doing this? Not just going through the motions to do that.
Yes?
Yeah, the consistency of the family thing. I'm here to tell you it pays off.
Thank you, Barry. Yes. Good.
I have a son that asked me, Dad, how are you doing? And you're working your mom.
Yeah.
It's like, what? And my son is asking me that question.
Yeah.
And you got to give him the right answer, right? Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Raise them was every Sunday, go to church. That's just what you do on Sunday. You go to church, come home, take a nap, go to breakfast, whatever. We're going to church on Sunday. That's the habit we're doing.
Right.
Because that's important to me and your mom. We're going to train you that way, teach you the ways of the Lord. The only way we can do that is every Sunday have a consistent going to church.
And just so we can embarrass Adam more, it's worked, hasn't it, right? Like we praise God because we see the fruitfulness, and our church benefits from that as he serves in church here, and he desires to grow. So you see faithfulness passed on. You see it work, consistency, faithfulness. Those habits come in. So yeah.
Cool. I think this is a good time to transition to teaching. And
yeah, if you got your Bibles, you can go to Joshua chapter 9. I tried to find something that could weave in all that we've discussed today. I think we find it in Joshua chapter 9. Joshua is a great study on leadership. If you ever want to just go through it, the first 11 chapters, the narrative flows really well. Then you get into discussion on the land, and unless you're a premillennialist, it might not make sense to you. But if you have the opportunity to go through it, you can see all that God does through Joshua, and it's a great transition of leadership from Moses to Joshua. But he has, in Joshua chapter 9, a confrontation where he stops these habits that we've been talking about. It's very interesting that we talked about consistency, and now we're looking at somebody who drops the ball in consistency, and the danger that happens and the demise that can happen if you don't stay consistent. So Joshua chapter 9, the first 8 chapters, transition has happened. They've taken over Jericho. They've watched God do great things. They had that blip on the screen where Achan and his sin, and the sin was in the camp, and then they ended up defeating Ai. They're on a great trajectory. They're doing a lot of great things for God. And then chapter 9 happens. If you take a look at chapter 9:1, it says this: as soon as all the kings who were beyond the Jordan in the hill country and in the lowland, all along the coast of the great sea toward Lebanon, the Hittites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites heard of this, they gathered together as one to fight against Joshua in Israel. So the Lord is always having these battles with Joshua. And over the next couple of chapters, it's these coalitions coming at the people of Israel. Which, what I love about Joshua and what we've learned throughout the entire book of Joshua is you need to be strong and courageous. You don't need to fear when those big battles come. Guys, any big battle that we face, God has had it planned. So we shouldn't face it with fear. We should have the faith that God wants us to go out and to fight those battles for His glory. But we need to maintain the glory of God as the ultimate cause. Notice what happens in verse 3. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and to Ai, they on their part acted, here's the phrase, with cunning, and went and made ready provisions, and took worn out sacks for their donkeys and wineskins, and worn out and torn and mended, and worn out patches and sandals on their feet, and worn out clothes. And all their provisions were dry and crumbly. And they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him, men of Israel, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So they've come, and here's the phrase, they've acted cunningly. What I want to do for a moment is just say, I think this phrase is a hint or maybe an allusion to the battle of worldviews. It's a battle of the worldviews in the Bible. You see, since Genesis chapter 3, we've seen that conflict happen. What happened in Genesis 3? The serpent came in to Adam and Eve, and he challenged their worldview. What was Adam and Eve's worldview in Genesis 1 and 2? God's king, His word is authoritative, and I'm going to follow it. That's a great worldview right there. You right there have the key to success if you understand that. That's the way God designed the system. He made it perfect. And what did Satan come doing? He came in and he acted how? Cunningly. You can actually trace that word. They have the same root. And I wonder if that's not an allusion to show, hey, anytime that there's going to be opposition against the people of God, it's going to be a cunning scheme on the side of the serpent, the side of the devil, to come in and go, hey, think about this, or I'm going to distract you a little bit by going this way. And that's exactly what we have here happening with the Gibeonites. Because the Gibeonites know something, and we're going to find out that in a moment. Look at chapter 9, verse 6. They said, to the men of Israel, we have come from a distant country, so now make a covenant with us. But the men of Israel said to the Hivites, perhaps you live among us, then how can we make a covenant with you? See, God had told the Israelites, don't make a covenant with anybody in there. You got to eradicate everybody. You got to get rid of them. You can't have them influence you. You must make sure that they're gone. And so they know this. And so the Gibeonites, they want to put on a front. They want to act cunningly, and they want to try to distract the people. But watch where the failure of leadership happens. And you can write it down, number 1 on your outline this way. You want to make sure that you don't lead with your ego. Number 1, don't lead with your ego. Don't lead pridefully. Watch what I think begins to happen as the ego of the Israelites is stroked by the Gibeonites here. So they're coming and they're saying, well, perhaps you live among us. And we know that God, Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 7, said, don't make a covenant with the people in you. And so they said, look at this, verse 8. Here's humble talk. We're your servants. And Joshua said to them, well, who are you? Where'd you come from? And they said, from a very distant country. Your servants, again, second time he said that, have come. Because of the name of the Lord your God, let us praise your God. For we heard a report of him, all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites, who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and the king of Heshbon, and to Og of Bashan, who lived in Asaroth. So our elders and all the inhabitants of our country said to us, take provisions in your hand for the journey, and go and meet them, and say to them, we are your servants, number 3, and now make a covenant with us. Notice how many times they tried to promote just the Israelites. We're your servants, guys. We're nothing but humble servants. And watch how that flattery, if you're leading by ego, can be very dangerous. You're going to start to believe something that isn't true about you. You're not designed to lead by your own ego. You're not designed to lead by what you want. We've said we're designed to lead by the system that God's laid out for us. That's what happened with Adam in the garden. Did God really say that? He got him to question it. And now these people are coming and they're saying, oh, you guys are so great. Your God's awesome. We just want to come. We want to make a covenant with you. They're flattery. Just write down a couple verses here. If you fall to leading with your ego, Proverbs 26:28 says this: a lying tongue hates its victim, and a flattering tongue works ruin. If you are driven by ego, all it takes is flattering speech. I mean, you wonder why, if there's ever, you read about the adulterous woman inside of Proverbs. The adulterous woman has smooth words. If you're leading by ego, all it takes is some flattery over here by some woman, and now you've destroyed your marriage. We need to make sure we never lead by ego. We need to lead by what God has said and for His glory. Proverbs 29:5 says, a man who flatters his neighbor is spreading a net at his feet. And that's exactly what's going on in Joshua chapter 9. If you want to head back there. Now, if you notice all those battles, these guys are so good at being cunning, because they mention a lot of the earlier battles, but they don't mention the most recent ones. Why? Because they want to put on a front that they're from a very distant country. There's no way news could have traveled of those recent battles right there. So they're talking about the earlier battles going on, and they're putting on this great show, and I think the people of Israel are believing it. All right, we'll be your servant. We'll make a covenant with you. A covenant, if you understand it in the Bible, is such a strong tie. You would never do that flippantly. Like, I hope you would never just walk into, today, if you think about it, you'd never walk onto a car lot and just go, yeah, sign me up for a lease. I don't care. Let's just do it, without thinking about it. You enter into something like that, they could own you, they could ruin your credit. That's very important. A covenant in the Bible is so much more than that, and they're going to flippantly just enter into it. We can never lead with our ego. Can you go with me to Mark chapter 9? Watch how much of a danger this is for Christian men, Christian leaders. Mark chapter 9. Can't lead with ego. Take a look at verse 33. Actually, start in verse 30, Mark 9:30. It'll give us good context. Mark 9:30 says this: they went on from there and passed through Galilee, and he did not want anyone to know, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and when he is killed, after 3 days he will rise. But they did not understand the saying and were afraid to ask. And when they came to Capernaum, he was in the house with them, and he asked, what were you discussing on the way? But they kept silent, for on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. Now, this is the disciples, okay? This is Jesus' dudes that he's brought together with him. And he's just told them, I'm your king, and I'm going to go on the cross, and I'm going to die for you. And as that speech is going on, they're arguing in the back, which one of us is the greatest? Don't think that you don't struggle with ego. You do. In some manifestation, you do. And you will watch it probably manifest itself in one of two ways. When you get really angry at something, and it's sinful anger, that's probably because your ego is taking you in that direction. And what your anger is doing is trying to protect what you most value. Like, I am very angry at these birds right now, and I want to shoot them sinfully. Like, if you gave me a gun right now, I'd probably shoot them. But I don't want to do that to God's creation right now. I don't have my hunting license as well, so it'd be illegal. But if you have that anger, you're going to protect what you most value. Or you're going to go into self-pity. And that's, I don't want to say, they're both bad. That becomes even worse, because it's this whining that you didn't get what you most wanted. So either I'm going to protect what I most want, or I'm going to whine about what I didn't get. And the Christian leader can never be driven by that. We're driven by a crucified Savior who rose again from the dead, and we go out and preach that message. I love the way Paul said it. I came to you, Corinth, and I knew nothing except what? Jesus Christ and Him crucified. It's 1 Corinthians 2. Now, if you read the rest of the letter, Paul's not saying there's nothing else he talked about. He talked about the implications of what that means for Jesus Christ and Him to be crucified. He talked about holiness. He talked about pursuing God. He talked about serving in church. That all stems from knowing Jesus Christ and Him crucified. But if you don't think there's ego inside of you, Just take a look at the disciples here. What did Jesus say right after that? He sat down with the 12 and he said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. And he took a child and put him in the midst of them, and taking them in his arms, he said to them, whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me. It's just talking about the humility needed to lead, and we need to make sure we have that. In our worldview, guys, the worldview that's presented, it started back in Genesis 3:15, where God said, I'm going to send someone born of a woman. The seed of the woman is going to crush the head of the serpent. Even though the serpent tried to derail what I wanted, I'm going to be victorious in the end. If you read the end of the book of Romans, it's so great. It talks about the God who's going to crush under his foot the head of the serpent. That is the worldview, the constant clash that's going on. You get to be a part of the winning side, but you're ineffective if you're leading with your ego. And that's what we have here in Joshua chapter 9. Head back there. Joshua chapter 9. Notice what happens there. So they're coming. They're putting on a good show. Joshua 9. And then in verse 12, he goes, look, here's more. Here's our bread. They should get an Oscar for this. It's still warm when we took it from our house and as food for our journey, and we set to come to you. But now it's dry and crumbly. These wineskins were new when we were filled, and behold, they have burst. These garments and sandals were worn out on a very long journey. So the men took some of their provisions. Here's this ominous phrase, verse 14, but did not ask counsel from the Lord. And Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to live with them, and the leaders of the congregation swore to them. So number one, we don't want to ever lead with our ego. It's very fragile. It's not worth it. It's not what you were designed to do. But number two, never lead like an atheist. Why don't you write that down on your outline? Never lead like an atheist. Don't lead like an atheist. And you wouldn't think that we would have to say something like that at a church, right? Talking to a group of Christian men. But we have Joshua here, right? Joshua is a man who has seen miraculous things that God has done. And it says Joshua didn't seek the Lord. I mean, this is what it ultimately means to come together and to say, I want my prayer life to drive my passion, because if I don't seek the Lord, I'm depending on my own wisdom. And that's exactly what Joshua did right here. Right? You should, if you have struggle with this, if you have struggle having your prayer time in the morning, why don't you write this verse down and post it on your phone so that when your alarm comes up, it says this: Joshua did not ask the counsel of the Lord. Literally, he didn't seek the words, the mouth of the Lord. God told him back in Joshua chapter 1, you are to be strong and courageous, meditate on my law day and night, and have all of that be what we do. We do it based on the counsel of the Lord. We want to make sure that we have that going on. Don't lead like an atheist. Would you turn with me to James chapter 4? James chapter 4. We see a little bit of this conflict that goes on inside of the leader. James 4:1, what causes quarrels and fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? That's that struggle of that worldview. You know the worldview is God should be glorified and he should be praised, but you have inside of you, no, I want my desires and what my program is. And he says this, you desire and do not have, so you murder. You get angry at someone. You covet and you cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. Here's the phrase, you do not have because you do not ask. Right? This is what it means to pray. And guys, here's something that I'd really encourage you to do so that we would see this group of men do something incredible. Can you write down something to pray for this week? James chapter 3, verse 14. James 3:14. What I want you to do is pray specifically this. Two things. James chapter 3. Verse 14 says this, but if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not boast and be false to the truth. So what I'm asking you this week to do is pray, God, as a man and a leader in your church, as a man and a leader in your community that you've put me in, as a man and a leader in my home, as a man and a leader at work, please protect me from bitter jealousy and selfish ambition. We have to have that stripped from us. We have to have that taken from us. We cannot be driven by a false passion, because if that's in the driver's seat, it will lead to great damage. But then the second thing, if we're going to have that as the put off, write down 2 Corinthians 5, 9. 2 Corinthians 5, 9. Which says this, so whether we are at home or we are away, we make it our ambition or aim to please him. That's the ambition we want. So we're not having selfish ambition as leaders. We're not letting our ego drive us. And we're not acting like we've got this all together. We're going to go to God and pray. We're asking him to keep us from things that are going to derail us. And we're going to ask him to put things in us that will do great things for his honor and glory. So God, give me the ambition to do what is pleasing to you. And those two prayers right there will keep you from living like a practical atheist, because you're going to God and saying, God, this is what I want you to do inside of me. Do you remember that verse, 2 Chronicles, I think it's 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people would what? Humble themselves and pray. Do you see how those two things go together? God was telling the Israelites, if you would just do this, you're going to follow the commands that I'm laying out for you. And so if we would be those types of people who would just humble ourselves and pray, we wouldn't live like atheists. I mean, honestly, if somebody took the way that you make decisions and you lead, and they put a non-Christian right next to them, would there be enough of a difference for them to spot? Could they go, oh, this one is really concerned and really making decisions based on what God wants? Or is it really just mirror and look the same? You know, could they take a business book and just line it up and say, wow, you just made a business decision there? Well, what about God's business? What about what he wants? What about his program? We can't let that happen. Go back to Joshua chapter 9. One more thing we see here. So we don't want to lead with our ego. We don't want to lead like an atheist. Look at what happens in verse 16. At the end of the 3 days after they made a covenant with him, they found out that they were their neighbors and that they lived among them. And the people of Israel set out and reached their cities on the third day. Now their cities were Gibeon, Sherefiah, Beeroth, and Kiriath-Jearim. But the people of Israel did not attack them, because the leaders of the congregation had sworn to them by the Lord God of Israel. Then all the congregation murmured against its leaders. But the leaders said to the congregation, we have sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, and now we may not touch them. And this is what we will do. Let them live, lest wrath be upon us, because of the oath that we have swore. And the leaders said to them, let them live. So they became cutters of wood, drawers of the water for all the congregation, just as the leaders had said of them. So here is a pivot I hope that you can see is going on in the text. And you can write it down, number 3 on your outline this way. We want to lead by protecting God's honor. Lead by protecting God's honor. So we've seen what happens when we negatively chase our own ego. We've seen what happens when we act like atheists. If we don't lead and do the things that God is asking us to do because we're not praying to him. But now we want to lead by protecting God's honor and glory. Notice that the people come together and they find out, man, we really messed up. These are people, they're close by us. And the people murmur, and some of the commentators are saying it's probably because they said, hey, listen, they made this under false pretenses. They tried to lie against us. It's okay if we don't follow our word right here. But the leaders of Israel, I think, this is an interpretive thing, but I think are doing the right thing by saying, we swore by the name of the Lord. If we break that, it dishonors the name of God. So now they've made a pivot. They were thinking about themselves and they didn't go to God. Now they're going, well, now I am concerned with God. I don't want to go back on my word because it would allow these people to dishonor the name of God and think that he's not a God of faithfulness, not a God who's trustworthy. So I think that's what's happening. Verse 22, Joshua goes to them and says, why did you deceive us, saying that you're from a distant country? Now therefore you are cursed. Some of you shall never be anything but servants, cutters of wood, and drawers of water. Here's the phrase, for the house of my God. And then at the end, verse 27, but Joshua made them the cutters of wood and drawers of water for the congregation and for the altar of the Lord to this day in the place that he should choose. So now he makes the decision, we're not going to dishonor the covenant that we made with them because we made it in the presence of God. I want to protect God's reputation. I want to protect his glory. But then he does something even wiser. And this is again an interpretive thing, but if you look at it, where does he put these Gibeonites in charge of? He puts them in charge of cutting wood for the house of God. So they're now in the business of helping them do what God has called them to do, providing sacrifices and worship to God. And so when an Israelite in genuine humility and repentance comes and offers a sacrifice, they're doing so because these Gibeonites have cut the wood and have brought it and supplied it. So now they're putting the Gibeonites around what should be the true and ultimate religion, which is going to Yahweh with a pure heart and following His word. So I think they've pivoted and they've made it now about Yahweh and not about themselves. This is what we have to do as a leader. You're there to protect God's reputation. Whatever it is, whatever it's going to cost you, it must be that God in His glory is promoted. You guys, if you have kids participating in Operation Great Light. See, I wasn't going to mess that one up this time. Operation Great Light. They're going to get something this week. It's so cool what our Kidsman team has done. Red tape, what's that called? Ace tape. They've taken this ace tape and they've created like a word sort of jumble. They put all these different things on a piece of paper and it just looks like jumble. You can't decode anything out of it until you get this ace tape and you put it over top and it eliminates all of the babble and it puts into focus what the word is right behind the scene. That is the idea of a worldview. If you want to explain worldview to your kids, the ace tape is the Bible. And this world doesn't make any sense. But what you get to do is put the ace tape over it and now you see. We don't want to get distracted. We don't want to let our ego drive us. That will lead us into confusion. But when you take that ace tape and you put it over there, you clearly see through the worldview of the glory of God, this is what we need to do. So guys, explain that to your kids, but live it out in your life. So you take the ace tape of God's word and over everything you put it and you go, that's what we need to do. That's protecting God's reputation. And when we lead that way, we'll watch God do some great things. All right, I'm going to pray. I've gone longer, and then you guys are going to be, Mike's going to explain. Do you need to explain anything? Yeah, Mike will come up and explain. God, we want to make it our one ambition to be pleasing to you, and so we ask in the name of Jesus that we would do what He did. We would do only what pleases you. We would live for your honor and glory. We would not be self-promoters, but God, we would be selfless in our service. So the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give His life as a ransom for many. God, help us as a congregation of men to do that, and who do that with the passion to see your name glorified. And we ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen.